welcome to Adventures in Life. I'm Earl Beecher, your host. Our guest today is Mimi Lozano-Holtzman. She is co-chairperson, along with Judge Frederick Aguirre.
Yes, Aguirre.
Of the, what is the exact name of the project that you're co-chairing, Mimi?
Well, one aspect of it is the Galvez project right now, but it actually comes under the Hispanic American Heroes series.
Hispanic American
Heroes series, yes.
That's an interesting title. What
What
is it and how did it get started?
Okay. What we're looking for is to give the Hispanic youth who have some heritage, Hispanic heritage, Latino heritage, Chicano heritage, whatever we want to call it, but Spanish language heritage, give them some heroes that they can look up to. And most of U.S. history doesn't approach it from that viewpoint. They approach it from the history of the United States. So a lot of the Latino kids do not have the opportunity of knowing that, in fact, there were heroes out there that were instrumental in bringing about actually the American Revolution, the success of the American Revolution.
Now, wait a minute. You said most of it comes from the history of the United States. Are we talking about heroes outside the United States, or people who participated in forming the United States?
Good question, and the answer is yes, the people that participated. Spanish language, people that participated. And Bernardo de Galvez is one of our first historical figures that we're promoting with that kind of understanding. Yes.
Bernardo de Galvez.
Bernardo de Galvez,
Is there a city in Texas named for him?
Oh, yes, Galveston.
Galveston, Texas was named for this man. So he has received recognition.
Well, yes and no, because most people don't know that Galveston was named after him. I looked, there was a book that's published actually. I don't know if it was the World Book or if it was the Texas book, but they really don't identify him as it being named after him. They just say there's Galveston and there was the Galveston Bay, but they don't relate it to him. So
interesting.
So even though he was instrumental, he was the general that was in charge of the Spanish forces.
Spanish forces?
The Spanish forces.
In the Revolutionary War?
During the American Revolution, yes. The American Revolution, most people don't understand the success was dependent on the Spanish forces. We hear very often of the French forces.
Yes.
But that was because Spain was taking a back seat, but quietly in the back doing, promoting and helping the French in many ways. In addition to that, when the Spanish actually came forth and said, okay, we're taking a stand now against the revolutionary forces that the Great Britain is bringing in, then what they did is they made changes in how they had control within the borders of Nueva España, because Nueva España, which came under Spain, included everything west of the Mississippi, plus it included all the way into Florida, to the tip of Florida, St. Augustine being the oldest city in the United States. I believe it was 1513 or something, about 1520.
I know it's the oldest city in the United States.
Continual, okay. So, and then all the way south, we're talking about Mexico, Central America, South America. That all was under Nueva España. And he was then given the responsibility over the forces. A young man in his 30s was given this responsibility. And what he did is he made it difficult for the British forces to control the colonists several ways. They blocked the Mississippi River, for one thing. Went all the way up to Michigan, actually, taking forts. They blocked the Mississippi.
Wait a minute. You're saying the Spanish?
Yes.
Spanish, he led the Spanish forces.
He led the Spanish forces.
And they were putting forts up the Mississippi all the way to Michigan?
No, some of these forts had been taken. They'd been taken by the British.
Oh.
The forts that were in Florida had been taken. Some of those were taken by the British from the Spanish.
Yes.
Because they had Florida, and we're talking about Louisiana. Okay.
Right. He was the governor of what?
At one time, he was the governor of Louisiana.
Okay.
He was made governor of Louisiana, which gave him the opportunity. See, the forces at that time, when you talk about Spanish forces, they were really very multinational and multi-ethnic, because you had people that were like Maria Angeles Olson, who was actually the honorary consul of Mexico.
Give me her name again. I love that.
Well, it's actually Maria Angeles O'Donnell-Olson.
O'Donnell-Olson.
Which is interesting. I looked at that O'Donnell name because that kind of threw me a little bit when I first met her. It goes back to the 1600s in Spain. So I mean, it's a legitimate Spanish name, you know.
O'Donnell?
Yes, going back to the 1600s in Spain. I think, you know, that counts for a long time, you know, in there.
I would never make that connection. Okay.
Okay. So anyway, the Spanish forces were made up of a very mixed group. And she said, as we were at a meeting, and she said, well, to the people, she said, well, where do you think the soldiers, the ammunition, the blankets, the cattle, the cannons, where do you think all that came from? And she said, from Mexico. There was not a Mexico at that time. There was Mexico City, but that was, at that time, Los Mexicanos were from there. If you came from Mexico City, you were a Mexican. There were also Tejanos, you know, which are my bloodlines coming out of Texas. And they were involved in support. Plus, he was in Cuba. There was Cuba. There were forces from Cuba. There were forces from the Caribbean.
So
Plus,
he drew men for his armed forces from all of the...
Not only the Spanish-speaking. This is the thing that's so interesting. It wasn't just the Spanish-speaking that were involved in it. There were also the indigenous. You know, we know that there were indigenous that were on the English side, the various tribes fighting in different, there were some that were on the French. There were also some indigenous tribes from the Louisiana area, from New Orleans in that area, that were also on the colonist side. Plus, there were the colonists, the American colonists. So you had a diversity. There were blacks that were involved. There were free blacks that were involved, and there were slave blacks that were involved with Bernardo de Galvez.
Well, now, I was looking at the picture of him.
Yes.
And I noticed that down here it gives his birth date as 1746 and his death is 1786. He was only 40 years old.
He was very young when he died, yes. He
and
had been wounded.
He's left quite a heritage.
He's left a wonderful heritage. He was also of a family that was very influential. His father had been the governor of Louisiana, and then his uncle had done a lot of the explorations that were in other parts of the country, like in Sonora and down into, I'm not sure if all the way down into Baja, but the family itself was instrumental.
Now, you've got to straighten me out on a little bit of my history. Louisiana was named for Louis, the French king.
Okay.
And the Louisiana Purchase was made from Napoleon or France or something, and yet it was under Spanish control at the time of the Revolution.
Well, you know, it's very interesting because I was doing research one time in Louisiana because I was trying to figure out my relatives who came into Texas in 1731 from the Canary Islands and helped the foundation of San Antonio. The history shows that some of them were sent by the King of Spain to Nacogdoches to keep the French from coming in. You know, so you had Natchitoches and Nacogdoches, you know, one on one side and one on the other side of the Mississippi. And they were sent there. So I was very interested in looking at New Orleans because there was a Matia Peña, who was one of my relatives, and I found about 5 of them in New Orleans. And it was interesting in looking at the records that you saw in one point Spanish surnamed people were selling to French surnamed people, and then like 10 years later, 8 years later, 5 years later, whatever, then they had the French that were selling it back to the Spanish. So you could see it was going back and forth. That was it. The English wanted that. They wanted Florida. They wanted New Orleans. They wanted New Orleans.
Oh, you bet.
Okay, so that was going back and forth. When the Louisiana Purchase, it was actually the Spanish that, in some way, made some kind of treaty with the French for that property because it was under Spain. And again, this the lady that was the Spanish consul said, and the French, they didn't keep their promise. They were not supposed to sell it, you know, to the English. And so there was a lot of things that are unknown. Interestingly, you can find a lot of information about Louisiana and that very confusing exchange of property because of the Louisiana Purchase, which is being celebrated now.
Yes.
You know, so this is a good time if people wanted to find out.
The anniversary of it is coming up.
Yes, right. So there's a lot of books and maps and so forth that go into that time period.
You know, it's timely, I think, that we begin to dig back into that era and find out really what was going on.
Yes.
I studied in school, but I didn't know it all that well. I think what we need to do now is pause for a public service announcement, and then we'll be right back with Mimi Lozano-Holtzman. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Our guest is Mimi Lozano-Holtzman. She is the co-chairperson of the Bernardo de Galvez project.
Yes.
And it's my understanding, Mimi, that this is the first of several such projects in order to honor Hispanic American heroes.
Right, right.
To
give visibility. Let's just say to give visibility to them. We want to honor them, but if people don't know about them, we can't honor them. So we want to give visibility. And so we have some projects going in that direction. We've got a website that's called Hispanic American Heroes Series.
Excuse me, say that again.
Okay, it's HispanicAmericanHeroesSeries.com.
That's the website.
That's
if somebody
the website.
wants more information.
If somebody wants more information, they can go to it. Galvez is going to be the first. What we decided is there is an awareness now of Hispanics because of the numbers, the increasing numbers. So we're finding out now there is more of an awareness. I started doing family history in 1985.
I'm glad you didn't say 1885. I wouldn't have believed you.
1985. At that time, there was very little awareness, very little interest, except those of us that started to do our Hispanic heritage.
Yes.
When you start doing your own research in your own family, and I think this is true for anybody, it changes your understanding of history.
Well, family history is a big thing now. I mean, it's one of the most active things on the internet.
On the internet, right, because you can make connections on the internet.
Yes.
I've seen people. I do a magazine, a monthly magazine, that's called Somos Primos. No, you don't have...
Somos Primos.
It's called Somos Primos,
Now that's an electronic magazine. It's not printed.
No, it's not printed. I actually did the printed for 10 years as a quarterly for our organization, the Society of Hispanic Historical Ancestral Research. That's the actual...
Say that again. That goes up by awful fast.
That's a real long one. That's
Say it slower.
Okay. Society of Hispanic Historical and Ancestral Research.
Okay.
Okay, the magazine, the quarterly, is called Somos Primos. And Somos Primos means we are cousins. And the whole emphasis of it is as you start doing your research, you find out you're connected to a lot of people. And it's very interesting when I first started doing my genealogy to find out that people that I had already known and that were researching in Texas also, because my lines are in Texas, we actually found out we're related. I mean, we
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if you're both going back to a common area.
That's right, and that's exactly what happens when you do it. So the emphasis is que somos primos. We are cousins.
You were kind enough to do a show with me one time before dealing with Hispanic genealogy or family history. And I was surprised that you indicated at that time that the historical records for the Hispanics are probably the most complete
yes.
and accessible
yes,
of any group.
Yes, they are. We can actually, if you have Hispanic lines, you can actually go back 1,000 years. And some of the others, what you think, the German and the, you think of them as having a lot of being very orderly and everything.
Yes.
They can only go back about 600 years. The ones that have the biggest problems are the indigenous, which go back 150 years, and the blacks, which go back 150 years.
But there's more information on the blacks now, I understand.
Oh, yes. No, they've come out with good records, but I'm saying in terms of what's available, because as the blacks came in, then the problem is where they came from, which of the countries they came from. With the Spanish records, we know that if you've got a Spanish surname, you probably came, your lines are going to go back to Spain.
Back to Spain.
Yeah. So in a sense, that makes it easier.
What's this hard magazine I'm holding?
Para Todos is done. It's a Spanish magazine, Spanish language magazine.
It's Spanish language,
right.
So the articles are in Spanish.
Right, and the gal is Argentine, and she is appealing to everyone. And Para Todos means for everyone.
I see.
And she wanted to stay with, have it in Spanish. Now, one of the things that she's done very supportive of us is that we have an article in here about the Galvez project. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Because she has been supporting, and we have found a lot of support in the community. I'm shuffling through this. I know it's here.
Tell us about the Galvez. We don't care about the article because they can't read it on camera anyway.
Okay.
There
it is.
What are some of the things that are being done?
For it. Okay. We've got, and a lot of this is happenstance, you know, where you just, things just kind of fall in place. We have a huge project that's ahead of us. In Long Beach, we have a concert that's going to be given October 12th. The beautiful thing about that is the Long Beach Symphony Orchestra, they then had some kind of competition, but they have two composers who wrote music that are going to be arias, and they've already been written, arias honoring Galvez. And so this is going to be unique for that situation.
To the man that you're honoring.
To the man that we're honoring.
How nice.
Which means that's going to be available for people across the country.
And it's free?
And yes, the concert is free, yes.
So if anybody wants to go there, it's being given where?
Well, it's in the Long Beach Symphony Orchestra, at the Long Beach Performing Arts Center. And they can call, you know, they can
and
get
it's on Sunday,
Sunday the 12th, October 12th, yes.
Okay.
But in addition,
some people may see the show after the event, but it's still nice to know what is being done.
What is being done.
Yes.
Well, we're having another thing that's kind of interesting. We're going to have a Catholic Mass, a memorial Mass said for him. And we will have, hopefully, a reenactor of Bernardo de Galvez at the service giving the talk.
Now, which church is that in?
That's St. Anthony's Catholic Church in Long Beach.
In Long Beach.
In Long Beach.
Now, wasn't that the oldest
Yes.
parish in Long Beach or something?
It was
in the whole area here?
It was constructed in 1901, and it's a historical building. And
it's a gorgeous building.
It's beautiful. It's just, when I walked into it, and I'm not of the Catholic faith, but when I walked into it, just walking in and seeing the stained glass windows and seeing the light coming through, I was really, really touched by it. And the mosaics that they have, it's just beautiful. And that'll be the Friday before. It'll be Friday the 10th that we'll have it. But so what I'm saying is we're trying to have an outreach in different ways. The concert is one because then music will be available. We have the website. I have a cartoonist, Sergio Hernandez, who's a really good cartoonist. He's going to be doing some cartoons. He's already in the process of doing them. And we're going to put them on the website so that teachers can make use of it. So we're trying to prepare information that can be used after our focus on Bernardo de Galvez, and then we will be taking another hero. What we were trying to do was get heroes for the kids even before there was a United States.
These heroes helped the United States to come into being.
Exactly.
That's the thing, so that they have a share in the country.
Yes, and that was one of the feelings and one of the things that made a difference in my life in doing my genealogy. I don't know if I share this
Why did you feel differently?
I felt differently because before, my mom was born in a little town, Sabinas Hidalgo. She came in as a child, 12-year-old. Spanish was my first language. We spoke Spanish until I started school. I always felt like I was kind of an interloper, like how nice of these people to let me be here. I mean, you know, that's an odd sensation, but I can reflect and know that. And even though I did go on to school and went to UCLA and got a degree and everything, it wasn't until I actually started doing my family history. And then when I found out that my ancestors had founded San Antonio in 1731, that they came in as pioneers, you know, and they fought the Apaches and the Comanches, which were tough people, you know, tough.
Oh, you bet.
And then some of my ancestors were mestizos because they had Indian roots. You know, my lines go back 500 years in 1731, but I have lines that came in 1519, you know, with Cortez. So, and I didn't realize that my ancestors were here building roads, setting up mills.
You're part of a long process.
Yes.
You're part of it.
Part of it.
I see what you're saying.
It made a tremendous difference. It was like, well, I'm not an interloper. My family was making the roads before people came and walked on those roads. And my indigenous roots were walking on the stones that eventually became rocks. I mean, became, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It just changed, and it made me feel more a sense of American, being more American than less American, and more responsible for the welfare and the continuation of this country.
And what you're trying to do is get the young people to
feel that.
look at their family history
Yes.
and say, hey, I'm part of the total picture too.
That's right. That's right. For them to feel that their ancestors are worthy. This is one of the things that I wasn't ever interested in. This is why this is really funny what I'm doing, because I was not interested in history at all. I mean, I memorized it. You know, I gave it back to them. I got my grades and I went on. But I wasn't interested. When I went to UCLA, I actually found a way to get out of U.S. history. I took economics instead, you know.
I've been reading history lately too and hung up on it.
Because, well, it was like it had nothing to do with me. I mean, the westward movement, what does that have to do with me? My family, I know, came from Mexico. My dad was born in San Antonio, but his family came from Mexico. So first generation on my mom's side, second generation on my dad's side, spoke Spanish at home, didn't really feel connected. So I didn't want to take history. But now it's fascinating because I know my people were involved in all this history that was going on. You know, I had people in Louisiana and in Texas when all of the Revolutionary War was going on.
And they were part of the war.
And they were part of it.
They were part of the war.
That's were part
the thing.
of it.
We have to pause for another public service announcement. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Our guest is Mimi Lozano-Holtzman. And Mimi, you were telling us about the exciting things that are coming to honor Mr. Galvez.
Yes.
But you brought a lot of other books here, which we've sort of ignored up to now, and I was looking at some of the titles. This one in particular caught my interest. Spain's California Patriots, 1779 to 1783, the war with England. What is the background on these books, and that one in particular?
The background is a gentleman that joined, he was in the military. He actually had gone to West Point. He had served his time in the military, it's 20 years. Then he became a professor at Long Beach State University. And then after that, when he retired for the second time, he got involved with the Sons of the American Revolution. And when he got into the Sons of the American Revolution, he realized there were very, very few, if any, Hispanic surnames among that group of heroes from the past. And so he started trying to investigate this because he knew, having served in the military, that there were a lot of Hispanics, and as he said, they were brave and noble soldiers, and they were not being recognized. And so he started doing on his own research, which led ultimately to 8 volumes.
Yes.
8 volumes of books, and each one of them is about 200 pages. And what he was doing was looking to see, during that time period, when the time period 1779 to 1783, when Spain was in support of the American colonists during the American Revolution, then each of those soldiers would have an opportunity and should, if they chose, be sons of the American Revolution. And that was what he was trying to do. It has been a very successful move on his part, because the Sons of the American Revolution on the national level are now supportive of this concept. They've even have done special events, you know, to try and bring the Hispanic surname people in. We were...
What is the name of the man who did the books?
Granville Huff, Dr. Granville Huff, H-O-U-G-H, and his daughter worked with him.
Maybe there are a lot of his ex-students out there that are watching the show.
That might be interested. The interesting thing, too, is I was talking about my own interest in doing my own family history research. A lot of the information that we're making use of was done through the efforts of non-Hispanics. I mean, Granville Huff, obviously, he's put in 5 years of his life into doing these books. And what he's done is he's actually gotten the soldiers, the names of the soldiers in each one of the states. We're talking about California, which is 2. Then he did Arizona, he did New Mexico, he's done Texas, Louisiana.
Yes, the books have the various titles, and they seem to be focused on a geographic area most of the time.
Yes, and then the last 2 are actually a little bit broader, where he actually goes into Mexico, into northern Mexico, and then the Caribbean is the last one. And he was trying to show how spread out and how supportive the Hispanics were, that the Spanish were of it. Another gentleman that's done a lot too is Robert Thornhoff. He's done this little book, and he's also been very involved.
I was looking for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's also been very involved, and George Reiskamp is now head of the Family History Center well, it's the research center, BYU, Brigham Young University. The LDS Church is the one that has done the gathering of the records that all of us have been making use of. And I think it's very touching. It touches me that if Hispanics wouldn't have the opportunity of doing their research and finding what I was able to find, had it not been for people that were willing to take the time to do this for it. Non-Hispanic people. So I feel like the responsibility that we as Hispanics have is to do our research, add it to the pool of information about us, and then that information is then going to change people's ideas of our right to be here. You know,
somebody said to me the United States used to be known as the melting pot, but now it's known as the salad bowl. And what you're saying, I'm beginning to think the melting pot still applies. I
think it does. The assimilation of the Hispanic is very, very successful across the world. I mean, this seems. I was doing some research, and someone said, a Japanese lady, she said she came across some records in Japan in 1600s where there were Spanish soldiers marrying Japanese women. This is in Japan in the 1600s. We obviously know that the Spanish were in the Philippines. We know by the surnames that they have, okay, and we know the evidence of it. So the assimilation of the Spanish went all over the world. We presently, well, my name is Holtzman. I'm married to a man with Russian background. Okay.
So you have the mixed.
So that's what I'm saying is the assimilation is going on in the community, the Latinos. Judge Aguirre had told me that among the Hispanics is the highest level of assimilation. And I know, I mentioned the Japanese, but I also have two friends that have done research that only 2 generations back to their grandparents, they had Chinese grandparents. Right. So we have that mix, and as we talked before, we have the mulatto mix, where we have the black blood. So the Hispanics are very diverse, which is part of the confusion of how to give us a label. You know, you see that all the time.
They tell me it's time we must stop.
Okay.
I thank you for being our guest, welcome. And I want to invite you to come back because I know there's a lot more information you have to share.
I'd be happy to.
And I would like to thank those of you who are viewing for joining us, and please join us soon again for more adventures in life.
Thank you.